Welcome to Script to Screen's Talks podcast. Script to Screen is a charitable organisation dedicated to developing the craft and culture of storytelling for the screen in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Part of our annual program, the Talks series, brings the creative community together to hear inspirational speakers delve into their creative process, craft, philosophy, or the broader creative landscape. Script to Screen has partnered with the New Zealand International Film Festival to bring you a special series of talks with the filmmakers at the 2017 festival. Leanne Pooley spoke with Australian filmmaker Jennifer Peedom about her latest documentary, Mountain, and her experience of collaborating with Robert McFarlane, Willem Dafoe, Renan Ozturk, and the Australian Chamber Orchestra.
Wow, Mountain. It was the perfect combination of gut-wrenching vertigo and unspeakable beauty. It was amazing. Thank you, Jennifer. We have Leanne Pooley here today to start the Q&A. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie.
And the perfect person to do this Q&A because I have very few females in this mountaineering world, and you've...
Oh, but I'm not really I'm an imposter.
No, I'm an imposter. We're all imposters.
Look, thank you everyone for coming along. I'm going to start things off with bit of a conversation, and then I'm going to open it up to you because I'm sure you've all got things you'd like to ask Jennifer. But I'll start by saying never in my whole life have I been happier not to be on an airplane. So often you say, oh, I heard this film's good, and you're watching it on an airplane. Never have I been so happy to have seen a film on a beautiful screen like the Civic, because that film deserved that screen. And
yeah.
I just want to say what a beautiful, moving, incredible movie it is. Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, I mean, all credit to the incredible cinematographers. And there were many, Renan, my dear friend who shot Sherpa, was the principal cinematographer, but there were many, as you saw in the credits, people that contributed their work to the film.
Well, I'm going to start actually by talking about that, because the movie, it really has three key components. You've got the extraordinary words, you've got the beautiful, beautiful music, and then, of course, you have the mountains. Which came first, the mountain or the music or the words? Where did you begin this?
So it all began really with the music. It began... I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Australian Chamber Orchestra, but they're known to be one of the great chamber orchestras in the world, and they do lots of interesting collaborations. And I'd been to pretty much all of their concerts over the years. I used to play the violin as a kid, and they came to me and said, "Are you interested in doing something about mountains?" And I immediately said yes, because I thought, okay, here's something I haven't done before. And so Richard Tongeti, who is the principal violinist and artistic director of the ACO, has... he wanted to do it for a reason. He's interested in mountains. He's interested in the people that do what you saw them doing in this film. He's fascinated by those people. He's fascinated by Renan, my cinematographer, and is a huge fan of his. And he wanted to explore that, and that was pretty much the original brief. And he had some ideas musically that he brought to the table straight away. And it was interesting because straight away when we would sit together and watch the same footage, it kind of became immediately apparent that he and I had completely different reactions to footage. When he first started kind of showing me sketches of some ideas that he had musically, I was kind of shocked, because what he saw was horror and terror, and what I saw was majesty and beauty. And so that was a creative challenge that we had to overcome. But that sort of speaks to process. So in terms of how you went through the process of making the film, he was writing his music to your pictures. How far did you go with the pictures before you introduced the music? Talk us a little bit through the process. Yeah, so once I received the original brief, and when he first approached me about it, I had to think about, like, you can't take something like this on and... I mean, I never wanted it to be wallpaper to music. So I had to kind of think about, if I am going to make a film like this, and it was primarily designed as a concert work. So the ACO were about to start touring it nationally in Australia. But I wanted and needed it to work as a standalone film as well. So I had to think really carefully about what it was that I had to say. And after a number of years having worked as a climbing camera operator and, I'd worked in the mountains. I never really saw myself as a mountaineer, but I kind of wound up in the mountains making films about mountains, or people doing stuff in the mountains. I sort of had to think about, what I wanted to say, and I'd read a lot of books around the time that I had been doing a lot of mountaineering, and the one that had captured my imagination the most was Robert McFarlane's beautiful book, Mountains of the Mind. And so I had approached him to collaborate on this project as well. So I brought him on as a collaborator while I was over in London, still working on Sherpa. So he said yes, and he had his book really explored the revolution in perception with regard to our feelings towards mountains. So this idea that, only 300 years ago, it hadn't occurred to anyone to go and climb a mountain, that would have been, as he beautifully puts it, considered lunacy. So that was the overarching thesis. Something really specifically that I wanted to bring to it was this idea of someone who had felt that pull to the mountains and felt the allure and the siren song at the summit and all of those things. I wanted to express some of that. A lot of my friends thought of what I did as completely insane, yet for me it was just something that I did, and it wasn't that big of a deal. And then when I met people like Renan and the people he works with, was a cinematographer, to them it's just a beautiful form of self-expression. And so I kind of was interested in bridging that gap and trying to get some insight as far as it is possible. It's a really difficult thing to explain.
But where did you start? Did you start with putting pictures together to words that Robert had written already? So the process in terms of the order of how those things melded so beautifully.
Right. Again, it was totally organic. And so I went to him with an overarching idea. Robert. Richard, the Australian Chamber Orchestra, had come to me with this, very broad idea. I then started to bring in, we went into the edit. I started to pull in all of the footage. Some of it we shot from, ourselves. Renan, who I'd worked with on Sherpa, had an incredible library of footage. He said, well, go for it, it's yours. The other, you would have seen their logo in the credits, Sherpa's Cinema, another amazing group of cinematographers based in the Rockies in Canada, who he worked with a lot, said same thing. We love this idea. You're welcome to, literally they open up their edit suites and open up their hard drives and let me work with all of their footage. And I started to think about how to structure the film. So that's where it always begins, with the structure. Then it was the words. I would send Robert the words. I would say, okay, here are the ideas that I'm liking. So this bit in your book, which takes 17 pages to say, can you kind of say it in about 7 words? And so on and so forth. And sometimes, though, in some cases, we spent a lot of time on Skype. He works at Cambridge University. He's not able to travel. I would send him scenes. I'd say, okay, so this is scene, like this beautiful skiing scene with all those beautiful patterns, and I'd say, what does this trigger anything for you? Because I'm kind of thinking something like this. And he would then come back with something. Or I would say, so here's the bad version, here's what I'm thinking. And he would come back with a beautiful, I would call it robify this, please, and he would come back with a beautiful poetic version of what I was trying to say.
And what about the music? So working at all now?
So what about the music? The music, similar things. So Richard has some really initial ideas that were really about horror and terror, And so I then listened to absolutely everything that they had ever recorded, which is a lot of music. And I brought that into the edit, and we just tried stuff. And
So
some
he
of
wasn't
it,
writing to pictures?
not straight away. That came later. So, and some stuff stuck and other stuff didn't. And it was a real education in terms of it suddenly made me realise, so that's why they don't use more classical music in cinema, you know. Classical music is really tricky. It kind of goes around in circles and it ties itself up in neat little bows, which you don't necessarily want when you're making film. You know, you want things to escalate and do other things. There's a reason there's a whole lot of Vivaldi in the film because that worked really well. And at one point I was really concerned there was too much Vivaldi in the film. And so we spent 2 days trying to find alternatives, but we couldn't find any alternatives. It just worked. So then at a certain point, so I had then anything that was not previous recordings of the ACO, I had then put temp music in, which is what my normal process, what I would normally do in a film. I would temp score the film, which raised many eyebrows in the ACO
I always
camp.
use temp music.
Yeah, particularly when you're dealing with someone as musically literate as Richard Tongedi. And he then would respond to that. In some cases, so what we did we went and shot in Japan. And Renan came over and we were all there together and we had an edit suite going, and he would come in after a day's skiing and look at what we'd done, and he would just start playing his violin. And the Everest commercialism section came out of that. Then in other cases he would, it was much further down the track, where he would just, compose as a normal relationship that a director would have with a composer. He would say, okay, what are you trying to say? And he would come back with something, again, quite different. And I'm saying, why are you feeling so aggressive about this? and it was just finding the language. And beautifully he kind of found a way of, it was very important to me that I knew from the outset that this was a collaboration. So it had to be what he wanted to say as well as what I wanted to say. And he beautifully found a way of expressing what we both wanted to say. And so there are moments very early on in the film where there's some, aggression almost, and kind of horror and that terror thing that he had going on, or he calls it the sublime. And I just wanted it to be, isn't this amazing and beautiful? And, and he found a way of expressing both. And that was the beauty, that was the beauty of that collaboration.
And the material, you were saying you gathered material from lots of different sources. Was there a lot of material that you shot yourselves specifically for the film? What was the sort of percentage gathered versus shot?
Yeah, so the stuff that I directed was probably ended up being 30% of the film. Renan, because we had been talking about this film for so long, he'd given me open slather to his. So when I was on the festival tour for Sherpa, actually, I went over and spent a couple of days in Salt Lake City where he's based, and just sat there and watched stuff and pulled stuff down onto hard drives. He might have used 30 seconds of it here, or like the beautiful stuff of the opening of Alex Honnold free climbing that wall, which happens to be in Mexico. He'd already shot that. But there was hours of rushes that had never been used. Then, for example, the highway, the tightrope walker guy, he just rang me one day and said, well into production. And this thing went for years. This thing went for so long because orchestras have really long lead times. So it was a long time till we could actually record the score. So we sort of went into edit, then we'd rest, and then we'd edit again. And in the meanwhile, Renan would say, hey, Jen, I've got these crazy French guys are trying to do something, and do you want me to go out and shoot it? And I'm like, yes, go. So we just run out there in his car and get his drone out, and, he kind of knows everybody in the climbing world and they all really respect him. So they're like, sure, film it, fine. So, he'd then send that stuff down. So some stuff was just kind of super organic, the whole thing. Then when we were in Japan together, he would say, I feel like you need to escalate this a bit. You need to make it a little bit more extreme. You should go and talk to these guys who are doing this crazy stuff, and those were the guys that were catapulting themselves off the mountains.
There's that thing that at the end of movies that says, no animals have been hurt or injured in the making of this movie.
I know.
Is everyone that's in your movie still walking?
No.
No.
However, at the time that the footage was shot, they all survived. So, and there should be something at the beginning. I should really say that, actually. No one died in the shooting of the film. Many of the wingsuiters have since died. Some of the skiers have since died. Yeah, so the guy that gets tumbled up in that crazy avalanche, he survived that avalanche. He's since died in something else. The wingsuiter who flies through the hole in the rock survived, obviously that, but he's since died.
I heard about his death actually made the news, I think.
Yeah.
You're going to leap off mountains, as they point out in the film. It's a risk, yeah. The sort of... your own affection for the mountains and your own feelings for them. How did you feel as you were moving through this, that balance between your words, your feelings, and Robert? That is Robert attached in the same way as you are? Do you share what you feel?
He and I think, really do share something. We're fascinated by... He's like me. He's got young children. We're almost exactly the same age. He has a job, works at Cambridge University, but when he can, he goes out and he goes climbing, and he loves nature and he loves the natural world, and he finds mountains majestic, and he loves the feeling that it gives him to be among them. And so I think he and I share something really in common there. It was a really beautiful experience working with him, and so I think that came quite easily. And I think the interesting thing is that even we, on one hand, we think people doing those kind of crazy things are crazy. On the other hand, we kind of get it. We get it because we've felt a little bit of it, but we've pulled back because we've got kids and we have to be responsible. And
it's quite blokey, all that. I spotted a couple women, but it's a blokey world.
It's a very blokey world.
How do you find yourself navigating the blokiness of that space?
It's funny. I kind of become one of the boys when I'm in that environment. It's been quite a while since 2014 since I was last on an expedition, and usually I'm one of the only women on the expedition, and usually I don't notice that. But it is a blokey world, yet there are a lot of men in that world that are beautifully romantic souls and very sweet people. I included whatever footage I could find of women. Like, hey, there's a woman, let's, and there's not a whole lot of them because it is a very blokey world. But I do think as a female, casting a female gaze, to use that expression, over this world, I think I came to realise that it was a feminine gaze that I brought to Sherpa and I brought to this in a way. It was that you look at things from a slightly different point of view. And I try not to judge the people. I just try and understand them. But, there's some judgment there, obviously, when we're talking about climbing, not queuing on Everest and all of those kind of things.
Yeah. I'll ask one more question and then I'll open it up to you lot. So if you have your questions standing by. Drones.
Yeah.
Drones. How have drones, so we're talking a lot of those beautiful areas are aerials or drones. How do you think drones have changed the way we can interact with making films about the mountains?
Yeah, just even in the years that I've been, even in the last 5 years, it's just changed dramatically. And you still can't fly drones, on Everest at that height. So everything you see in the film in the Himalayas is shot by helicopter. But things like Alex Honnold in that opening sequence, that's all drone. Those tightrope walkers are all drones. I mean, it is the climbers of the world and those adventurers that are pushing that technology, and that everyone else then catches up after them. So guys like Renan are the ones pushing the limits, and they're the guys that, you know, the Movi Free Fly Systems and GoPro and all of these people are saying, here, take our stuff. You know, when we shot Sherpa, we were given all this equipment for Renan to test, and it gave us a level of production value that we could never have imagined. Having it made it just another level of cinematic, because they're the guys testing the gear in the extreme environments. And so, yeah, the drones, I mean, it's one thing to have that equipment, it's another thing to know how to use it. And, you know, again, Renan is just really good at it. He's like a ballet dancer when you see him operating that equipment. And he's crashed a lot of drones. He's well known for... I was filming him running around with kids in Nepal, you know, and stacking and crashing tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, you know, and I posted it on YouTube, and my producer made me take it down because she was worried about the insurance claim. But yeah, he pushes everything to its limits. You know, he pushes his life to its limits, and
But it takes you there in a way that is just so...
yeah, it gives you a whole other point of view, doesn't it?
Really,
Yeah.
really does. Does anybody like to join in with a question themselves? Yes?
Yeah, I've worked with Renan on Maru and on the latest National Geographic.
Oh, with the bee hunter?
Yeah, with Sherpa cinema and things like that. Just out of interest, so I work on the digital side. Out of interest, does Renan capture what you want to film in a way? Has he got the eye, like the female eye, if you want to say?
Oh my
So
God.
can you all hear the question? Does Renan, the cinematographer, share the...
Were you interning with him in Salt Lake City?
No, I went to his place and stuff, but
Oh, because he talked about this Australian guy, or are you a New Zealander?
no, I'm Australian.
Nice to
Hello.
meet you.
So how does your relationship really
yeah.
with Renan work
I mean,
in
so
terms of the
does
vision?
Renan? This is fun. Does Renan film what you want to see, like essentially that female eye?
Totally. When I discovered Renan, I just went, oh, that's the guy. You know, that's the guy. We're like this. For me, he's a female gaze. He's the most curious, beautiful, sensitive soul. You know, his wife is the most gorgeous. Her middle name is Free Solo. You know, they are my favourite people in the world. I just adore them. And to find a collaborator like that, you know, it's just, you know, it's kind of changed my career. So he does. He sees things. I mean, the way he observes mountains is, as you saw in the film. I mean, he shot the grand percentage of that film, and he views the world. The way he sees the world is the way I want to observe the world. It's the way I want to show it in the film, and it's very respectful, and it's reverent, and it's romantic, and it's, you know, and he just keeps the camera moving. And no, he's the hardest worker I've ever met. He's completely obsessed, and
His affection for what he's doing is on the screen. You see it, I think.
that's it. Yeah, he's a very special guy.
Yes. Sorry.
Hi, Jennifer. I'm not sure if this is on.
Yep.
Yeah,
I gather you're a mother.
I'm a mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you encourage your children to climb? I want you to know.
So, yes. So I have two kids, a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and in January we went to Nepal and stayed with my beautiful Sherpa friends in Kumjung. Purvatashi, who was the main character in Sherpa and who briefly appears in this film. And I don't know. I mean, I have that approach to parenthood that you know, I take them climbing. We recently went to Central Australia, and I just said to them, you can climb whatever you want as long as you can get down on your own, because I'm not going to come and get you. So I just try and I do have my heart in my mouth. Tashi, my eldest child, daughter, she's absolutely got the climbing gene. She's totally a risk taker. She's just, oh, Mama, you'll just find that your fingers will stick to the rock. You know, she just climbs anything, and it terrifies me, but I just try not to be anxious about it. Yeah, so she's got that adventure-seeking thing going on for sure, and I just try not to be anxious about it. Yeah, but I've absolutely curtailed my own adventuring as a result of being a parent. So, you know, when I shot Sherpa, I only went to base camp and, you know, I don't take those kinds of risks anymore myself.
There was somebody in the back before. Yeah? Tell me, when is there much of Sherpa in this film? And did Sherpa inform, because you ended up making Sherpa before you made this film, did it inform the way you made this, having been through what you went through making Sherpa?
Absolutely.
I'm guessing there's a few people here who've seen Sherpa. Have many people seen Sherpa? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this film was absolutely informed by the experiences I had. Every experience I've ever had on a mountain has informed this film. And there's also quite a lot of Sherpa B-roll in this film. We shot 400 hours of footage on Sherpa, and it's a 90-minute film, so there was a lot of beautiful footage that was left on the cutting room floor. So, and in fact, the female Sherpa character that you see a few times in this film didn't make it into the final film on Sherpa, so I really wanted her to find a place, and she was thrilled to finally make it.
And one of the widows, the scene where the people left behind, was that one of the widows from Sherpa?
That was one of the widows, yeah, from Sherpa, who I saw again recently when I went back to Nepal. Yeah.
Now, some jump in before I keep going. Oh.
I was just really interested in your collaboration with Richard Community, and you said that you had such different views at the beginning. You said that you had really different views at the beginning of how to respond musically to some of the footage. Did he have a journey towards shifting his position as well? I mean, you obviously had to see what he saw and come to some sort of, I don't know, collaboration that was a little bit different to what you originally saw. Did he also do that? And did it answer some of his questions about what it takes to be on the mountain and why he was so fascinated in these people?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And what I kept coming back to was that above all else, this was a collaboration. So when you normally make a film, you know, the director boss, you know, no, I want you to do it this way. This wasn't the case in this film, and I had to take a deep breath every now and then. But ultimately, that was the beauty of the experience, and to see that orchestra perform the score that you hear live is really something to behold. And it was just a conversation. You know, he's very, actually, if you read any of the press he's done on Mountain, when he talks about composing, he hates cinema music. He just hates it. And he thinks it's all naff. And, and to be honest, he's probably right to some extent that it has become very, there are like 5-6 big composers working in Hollywood, and they just go on endless repeat, Hans Zimmer and everyone else around that. And so he wasn't prepared to do that. And yet I got that, I got that this was, for him, it needed to be work as a concert, but it also needed to work as a standalone film. And so I would just be saying, okay, but I'm concerned that the cinema audience is going to find that too much, there was some ear-bleedy stuff that was kind of finding its way in. And we just kept talking, and I had to find a language because initially I realised that the words that I was using didn't necessarily, I would say, majesty and beauty, and he would think something else. He really is an extraordinary kind of brain, and so I just had to keep communicating and finding ways to say. And I said, look, if we do that here, then we've left ourselves nowhere else to go. We've peaked too early, so we need to hold ourselves back. He's like, okay, I get that. So as long as you found a way of communicating, and he's had a lot of not great experiences with working on film scores, and so he's kind of at his limit with film scores, if you know what I mean. But he was really he was incredibly respectful, and I respected his talent, and we had a long time to kind of just process all of this stuff, and eventually we found a common language, and it's been a really great experience. And I'm glad for him that it's been a good experience, because it hasn't been for him on other films that he's worked on. Since Master and Commander, he did an amazing job on that. So I just kept coming back to the fact that it had to be, it was a collaboration, and I wasn't the only boss.
And have you seen it with I'm assuming that this is going to tour and the orchestra is going to play the score live. So there's a version without the music on the film.
Yeah, that's right.
And have you seen it with the live orchestra?
I have. So that was the world premiere, which is, that excruciating first screening of your film. That, and Willem Dafoe was there, and it was at the Sydney Opera House, and it was an amazing experience. It was just, the footage has you on the edge of your seat. Obviously, it's very thrill-seeking and whatever, but to watch those musicians, if you think about those musicians, they barely get any time between, moments. There's some sound design and some space, but it's intense. And, that incredible fratres that the other pet that Richard's playing, and then the Beethoven, and, it's, and it really is something to behold.
And is it very different experiencing it that way with the orchestra present to watching it the way we saw it? Did you feel?
Look, yeah, it's exactly the same score, except there's two moments. There's Richard in the film, he was okay with it happening, where the Beethoven, we find a beautiful moment to pull out. He could never do that in a concert of subscribers that know that particular piece of Beethoven very well, and so he continues the 5-minute.
You don't get to edit Beethoven.
No, you don't edit Beethoven, which I came to learn. And so then he goes into a solo which lasts for another 5 minutes. And, people were crying. It was kind of really, and there was a 5-minute standing ovation for the orchestra. Like, it was a really amazing piece of theatre in a way. Yeah, so that was, if you ever get the chance to see it in that way, I'd highly recommend it. But that is, the Australian Chamber Orchestra is playing live. So it is the same score, really, but it's just live. Anything live is obviously has a different level of engagement. And, so...
Yes.
Hi, I'm interested in the balance between the ratio of the words and the visual story. I think, there was a lot of space for the visual story to breathe, and then the words. And I wonder whether your process was that you started with a lot more words and trimmed them back, or so how did that process work, finding that balance?
Yeah, so it was probably more a question of the words to the music was the balance. And in fact, in the live version, there's probably about 15-20% less words. And we had to move them away from the Beethoven.
Move over Beethoven? No.
Yeah. And the Vivaldi. So there were certain composers, where... we couldn't have words and music, and that was Richard and I had these rules of engagement from the beginning, and that was one of them. And I said, okay, I get it, fine, we'll find a way. And so we just had to sit in a room and nut it out and figure it out. So this version has 15-20% more words. The words, it was a question of paring them back, but it was usually to make space for the music. And Richard wasn't always... When I first talked about this idea of words, he said, fine, you can have words for the cinema version, but I don't think it's going to work in the concert. And I kept kind of, and my trick in the end actually was, because he really adores Renan so much, and he's such a fan. When we were over in Japan together, I said, "Hey, Renan, do you mind reading these words?" And I got Renan to do the words, and Richard suddenly listened to them in a whole different way. And he said, "Oh, actually, I can see how this might work, as long as I don't go over the Beethoven." So it was just then a question of, literally, we sat in a room for 8 hours and we negotiated. Once we'd locked the film and the film version, the live version, where the words would go, where we'd move them, we'd pulled some out to create space. And it is about respecting those performers as well. When he's doing a violin solo, you don't want something chatting over the top. And when Tamara, the incredible pianist, was playing her, piano solos, you didn't want someone talking over that either. So we just found a way of creating space, and that's why there are so few words.
Willem Dafoe, speaking of words.
Yes.
When and how did Willem Dafoe become part of the team?
So quite late in the piece, because Renan had been the voice for such a long time, and it kind of worked. He's got a very laconic kind of understated thing, and the words are quite, as you probably heard, are quite highfalutin, and so it couldn't be. And actually, originally we had Robert McFarlane reading the words. He's very British, and it sounded very pretentious, and so we had to. That's why I got Renan to do them. And then it was just, I just kind of was thinking, who should it be? It had to be, couldn't be British. It had to be Scottish. It had to be Irish. It had to be maybe American or Canadian. And then a friend of mine who happens to be my agent said, "What about Willem Dafoe?" And I said, "Oh, yes, okay, that works." It's just on a whole lot of levels, because I had to be able to, people had said, it's an Australian film, I'm Australian. Geoffrey Rush, I'm like, can you imagine Geoffrey Rush in a mountain? No.
Oh, and Russell Crowe never
Russell
came?
Forget it. Russell. No, for a whole lot of reasons. And Jack Thompson, no, can't see him on a mountain either. It had to be authentic. And then it was also then that integrity as an artist. And I thought, because a whole lot of people wouldn't get this thing, it's a very creative thing, and maybe not for everyone. And I just I'd seen Willem Dafoe in a film called The Hunter, and I'd also seen some stuff of his in New York for experimental kind of theatre with the Worcester Group, and I thought, as an artist, he will understand what we're trying to do here. Well, if he gets it, he gets it. Bottom line, if he gets it, he gets it. And so Beck sent him an email. He said, "Sounds great. I love it. I love the words." So we sent him the words and a little kind of trailer that we'd done. And he said, "Yeah, sure. I love it. Talk to my manager." And that was that. And so I ended up going to Rome to record him. And he was out.
What a shame for you. Terrible.
And he's in Australia at the moment shooting Aquaman. So he was able to come to the premiere, and he's a beautiful soul, really wonderful person.
Does anyone have a last question before I thank Jennifer?
Can I just ask you roughly what was the budget for the film, and did it take a long time to finance the project?
Budget and finance.
Budgets and finance. So it kind of began as a commission from the Australian Chamber Orchestra, and on that small amount of money, I would have been able to not make the film that you just saw. And so I realised that I needed to bring on a theatrical distributor. In Australia, we have, I think you guys have the same thing over here, that produces offset. And if you have a theatrical distributor attached, then you can get 40% of your budget as a producer's offset, which enables you to invest that back into the film. So we did that. And then somewhere along the line, we got an IMAX distributor interested as well. So the budget just kind of kept growing, actually. So
that doesn't happen that often, does it? Growing budgets.
No. Yeah, but it was sort of 1.5 or something like that. Yeah.
Well, it's beautiful. And it's so nice actually to see a film that just allows you to be in the film. It didn't push you out of the film. You were in the film and in the mountains for that 73 minutes or whatever it is. So thank you for taking us up the mountains, and thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
The Talk series is proudly supported by the New Zealand Film Commission, Foundation North, Images and Sound, and White Studios. Music for the podcast was provided by Poddington Bear, and voiceover is Lucy Wigmore.